Hello.
Are we getting music today?
Nope.
Never.
You don't get music anymore. It hurts my edit.
Welcome to the Union Fitness Podcast with your host, Todd Edward Hammerhead.
Charles E. the Jasper.
That E is for Edward because we share a middle name, me and Charles.
Oh.
Yes. So welcome to the podcast today from the Union Fitness Studios
And
located
Josh.
on the north side of Pittsburgh.
Josh is here.
I was finishing. I was reading the entire thing. Josh Elsas on the producer mic. He is the MCA to my... I'm trying to think of another Beastie Boy. I'll go Chuck D on this one. I'll just mix rap groups
It's pretty
together.
painful, Hammer.
Yeah, and to my right, my Flavor Flav. And today on the podcast, we got one of the dudes of Union Fitness, Ward Standford. Ward, welcome to the show, brother.
He's actually
Hey there,
Bane's body double and stunt double.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Shirtless, outside, doesn't care, scaring little kids, Ward.
I did scare the kids yesterday. That's okay. They needed it. It's good life lessons.
There's a monster. Yeah, so Ward, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, we're
It'll be a
we're
good time.
excited because I think you have a lot of good information for the world.
cool stories, cool transformations,
Yes.
cool how-tos,
How-tos.
Yeah.
and random what do you do's.
And we can
Yeah,
say
definitely.
and one of the most thought out musical dudes of Union.
Oh, it's like a cheese board of music.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
but he has
It
good.
pairs nicely
I
with
like
what you're
that
doing.
alliteration.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
If he's the cheese board of music, then Cody is the leftover coleslaw at a cookout.
Oh no.
6 months later, listening to Big Booty Mix. Cody's tastes
Cody
terrible. I'm
alone.
sorry.
Yeah.
I love Cody to death. Music's terrible. So, Ward,
Shameful
tell our
job.
listeners about yourself. Tell us about you, brother.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a member at Union for about the last 2 years or so, and I'll tell you a little bit about kind of who I am, what I do first, and then we can kind of get into a little bit of my personal fitness history and that kind of thing. But so I'm a basically human resources person, have been for the last 16 or so years of my career. And what I usually tell people, the quick and easy version of that is my job in talent management is to basically hire people, get them in the door, keep them happy. That's it. Keep it simple. So what I've been focusing on in the last couple of years of my life, my career, is it dawned on me really last year in a huge way, but even before that is this idea that people are a lot more miserable at work, a lot more miserable during the day than they really ought to be in terms of their own health and wellness and all that kind of stuff. And everything that I had been reading at the time really focused on dealing with some of the symptoms of that instead of the underlying causes and behaviors. So actually, I know you know this, but I just recently got accepted. I'm going to be going back to school to study organizational psychology, specifically like humanistic psychology, which
Heck
has been
yeah.
something that I've been really interested in for the last year or two. After going through some of my own kind of personal stuff, working through different kinds of therapies and therapy modality, and we'll get into this with some of the nutrition and weight loss stuff too, is how I work, how I am, my brain, is once I dig into something and I find it really interesting, I have to know as much as I possibly can about it. So, and this is not here for the sake of this podcast, but just literally next to me, just because this is where I usually sit. This is the books on specifically on like evolutionary biology as it relates to humanistic psychology, just because it's like, well, now that I know that that's a thing, I need to learn everything I can about that.
You're like the
So
evil bad guy that learns everything now.
But he's
Kinda,
You are
yeah.
the villain.
But maybe he's
Yeah.
the good guy of the evil bad guys.
The bad guys are always the good guys. They're just represented wrong.
So you're saying he's the tall version of Danny DeVito
Yeah,
He's the Arnold Schwarzenegger of Danny DeVito.
in Batman.
I'm both the twins, basically.
Twins.
Yeah.
I'm all the twins.
Nice reference. I would say
Um,
you're more of the weightlifting David Bowie. Kind of cover all grounds. Never know what's coming at
Yeah.
you.
for those who don't know, I have a whole wall, which you can't see here, but I have a whole wall that is just my David Bowie wall in my house, which is multiple pieces of artwork that's David Bowie.
Fitting.
So yeah. So my whole thing is really trying to be as thoughtful as I can about my approaches to pretty much everything. And so you guys were joking about it before, but that, like, literally when you said it's like a cheese board, when I put together some of my playlists, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how does this thing pair with that thing in a gym setting on those speakers, based on who's going to be there at the time of day that I'm there. All those kinds of things play into it as I'm thinking about, and I don't know specifically why I'm like that. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but that's just kind of how I've always been. So that's kind of me in a quick nutshell. That's what I do for work. That's kind of what I'm passionate about. Where I'm going with my career, with my life, is trying to answer that question of how do I help people by integrating work and life together and not having them be separate anymore. Because work is a part of life, not to me this totally separate thing that people think about. So how do I make work about passion and about purpose and help as many people as possible get to that place?
You know, and you said something great there, Ward, and I love the whole line of thinking because, you know, not many people think HR and get excited about HR.
Right.
But to me, people, instead of chasing a passion, I think really good people will go to a job and find the passion in that job, you know, find how they can make a difference, whether it be in HR, whether it be running a gym, whether it be a strength and conditioning coach, or whatever it may be. They kind of find that because they're good at what they do. So my gut feeling is if I put you in my job, you would be doing the same thing you do now. How can I make people have the best hour of their life when they come into Union Fitness? You know, how can I change the world with that 1 hour? And I think that's, you know, kind of what you're digging at there. And I think it's awesome finding a way, because when I think of HR, I think of the movie Office Space.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah. And,
Yep.
and my dad was an adjunct at George Mason for over a decade. And he would always use that scene. Or like, remember, Friday's Hawaiian Shirt Friday.
Right.
Wear your Hawaiian shirt. And it's like, if people aren't buying your crap, then it's no good. So, you know, I think that's what someone who's good at what they do, they find, they sell, they build trust, they build that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it doesn't matter what you do. That my whole thing is like, you can tell, and it makes a huge difference, but you can tell when you go anywhere, if you're talking to somebody, if you're working with somebody and they're legitimately passionate about what they do, they light up in a different way. And then that lights you up in a different way.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter if you had on the guy from Commonplace, his coffee, man, I got excited about coffee listening to him. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go make a cup while I'm watching this. Because whether it's sandwich, tea, beer, working at a gym, working for a 5,000 employee company like I do now, is just like, okay, that's all great, but how can I do the best thing that I can do? How can I help drive this thing along?
Wardy, what are some, you said you make people's jobs, like your goal is to make them happier. What are some successful tactics that you found, or like some things that people are missing? Like, what's the missing link? What's the most common missing link to make people happier at work?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, the biggest thing is when you misalign values up front, that's when you get issues later on with it's called engagement. So employee engagement or being a citizen of an organization is basically like, a lot of times people use the rowing the boat analogy. So you've got people who are rowing in the right direction, you have people who aren't rowing at all, and then you have people that are rowing in the wrong direction. And the goal in sort of the way you look at organizational psychology or HR is to have as many people as possible rowing the boat in the right direction. And to me, that all starts at the very, very beginning, before you even bring the person on, is trying to understand, as a business, whether you're 2 people or 10,000 people, what do we care about? What are our values? What are the top 2 or 3 things, broad things? Yeah, I'm not talking about like if you're, if it's values of thoughtfulness or values of quality, values of passion, whatever it is, pick whatever words really get you excited. Then write your job description, the boring part of HR stuff, write the job description based off that. Don't worry about the tasks and making copies and can you paperclip stuff, right? Focus on the values and the characteristics that go there, then hire for those values. Ask questions in the interview process about those values. And then once you have somebody who's aligned there, it becomes a lot easier to integrate them into that whole system. That to me is like the easiest number one thing that most people get wrong is you kind of have these misaligned job descriptions where they really focus a lot more on like how many years of experience do you have? And it's like 5. How is that different from 4? How's that different from 6? What is the thing you're assuming about that, right? So you start in a bad way there. You ask pretty mediocre interview questions. The person lies most of the time anyway because they just want a paycheck, right? And then you end up with this person sitting there who doesn't know what they're doing, doesn't know what you do as an organization, and neither of you really care about each other. So I think if you start there first, that is one of the easiest ways to make sure you have a really high quality organization where all the people start to at least want to row in the right direction. Then after that, my biggest thing, like I kind of brought to before, and I don't want to make this too long of an answer for you, but one of the biggest things for me in terms of that rowing analogy again is, okay, great, you're here, you want to row in that direction. Am I actually giving you all the tools you need to row in that direction? Am I showing you how to row? Am I making sure you have good oars and paddles? I don't really know that much about rowing, but that's kind of, I saw.
You're talking to an expert over here, sir.
So that's what I'm saying.
Is it oar or paddle, Charles?
We'll save that for later.
Okay, yeah.
He doesn't know.
It depends on the context.
It depends on the context with Ward.
Yeah, I know. But so making sure that they have the right tools, the right training, the right communication to do that. And the biggest thing for me, like I said before, is not separating out life from work. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, that you need to make sure that people are, that there's no harassment trainings, that kind of thing. I think we get really confused about how to integrate real life with work. And it doesn't have to be the bad parts of it. It can be the good parts of it too, but basically just treating the person like a human being and all the different facets of what that means. So,
it's funny because I've often said that to have a great relationship at work, it's trust and respect. And I think that's what you're saying right there is if you can't build trust and respect with a person, and then it kind of ties into, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I still, when we had Adam Feit come in and do he did a Zoom call with us last year. Adam Feit's a PhD from up at Springfield, and he was strength coach in the NFL, owned a gym, did all these, very successful guy. And he said, the worst thing you can do is hire someone and then give them, here's all of your job responsibility. Now go do it. He said, slow drip them. It's like making coffee. Today, here's what you need to know. And here's how you can work towards that goal. And slow drip them. And in a few months, they'll know their whole job. But you don't need to. If
McDonald's
you
coffee, them.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
That's fast.
Oh, okay. I just
want some
terrible.
commonplace TJ coffee.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Nah, shameless plug.
Yes, commonplace. Listen
Wink,
to the last
wink.
podcast. So,
You're just done on a different level today. He's not with you. You're just doing so good at being a host, CJ.
Okay.
So, tell me if I'm wrong, but obviously I think the trust and respect's right up the alley. But then once I bring that person on, to me, it's a slow drip effect. We just hired a new employee, and piece by piece, I'm giving her her job, her actual job. I don't want to dump it all on her right now. I want her to give her time to understand one aspect and then move on to the next. And honestly, my biggest concern doing it that way is I feel like she might get bored at times.
Sure.
Is this my entire job? I'm like, no, more's coming. Just get that done and do it well and have fun with it. And let's move on to the next project. And so am I right or wrong or somewhere in between?
Yeah, no. Well, so you're right because those are your values. There are other places where they need to give somebody everything on day one, and I would say that's okay too.
If it's
you need to hire
for the job, and it's
right. You need to ask those questions up front. Are you the kind of person who wants to hit the ground running and sprint on the day one? Do I know for sure that you already have all those knowledge, skills, and abilities on day one to be able to do that?
And that would be, I think, if you were hiring the VP for HR, that's when you say, hey,
right,
here's what you're going to do. Go do it. Or a director of strength conditioning versus an assistant strength coach.
Sure.
Or
absolutely.
So I think obviously level is going to have a huge thing in the context there.
Yeah, and the specific task too. But for this environment, you're right. And what I would say too, to kind of add to that, is there's a separate part of that that's not, it's not the duties and all those kinds of things, the tasks that somebody has to do, even the job, as much as it's really related to the culture. Because what that newer person's also getting a chance to do is just watch and feel what it feels like to be there. What are the clientele like? How do the other trainers treat everybody? How does CJ treat everybody? Hammer got a really good reaction out of that person. What did he do with that person? What can I learn from that? And if you're bogged down on the first day with all these things you have to do, you miss all that.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot longer to get there.
So I want to transition here, Charles.
Transition it up.
So tell us about your personal fitness path.
This is where, Ward, you rip your shirt off and you have a Golden Girls tank top
He's drinking
on.
out of an osmotic glass water bottle that has filtered out the lead.
No, this is actually Mexican water, so I would imagine that.
Take two. Try again.
Fuck yeah, Topo Chico is
Topo
the
Chico's,
best.
Oh, it's so good. It's so refreshing.
Have you ever taken it and put it into cold brew?
No, but that's gonna be tomorrow now.
There's a new
That's
place
a great
so
idea.
fucking good, man.
Larryville.
So good.
Tonic Coffee. I think they do that there.
He was actually
I learned that in California.
For the record,
it's even worse.
Josh was falling asleep and then he saw that.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
I am simply writing down when I want to make clips. Hammer thinks I don't do
Expletives
anything
came
here.
out.
He's all about the beverages. That makes sense.
I mean,
All about the beverages, baby.
We were trying to talk about what we do here, about your fitness journey.
Yeah, it's been a long one. So to give you the full scope of this thing that I went through. So I was all throughout childhood and teenage years and early 20s, I was always overweight, always some kind of obese, whether it was like extremely morbidly obese or just a little obese. I had gotten up, by the time I was 24, I had gotten up over 400 pounds. And I don't know exactly how much I weighed because, as you can imagine, when you're 400 plus pounds, you don't really like to check the scale very much.
Sure.
Right. So the last time I weighed myself, I was over 400, but there were several months after that before I actually decided to do something about it. And it was funny because the two things that triggered me to kind of think like, maybe I should do something different with my life is every time I went to the doctor, for a sinus infection or whatever, it would always be like, so have you thought about bariatric surgery? And I'd be like, for my sinuses? and they would say, no, you're going to die. You need to do something about this. So, that was the first kind of thing. It's like, boy, this is getting so out of hand that just any random medical professional is bringing this up at this point. And then the secondary thing was I have a few people in my family who are also overweight, who have been overweight, and seeing them age, into their 60s and 70s, and even 80s now, and some of the medical issues that they were having, the mobility issues that they were having, I even at 24 struggled to I literally would only buy slip-on shoes because I can't bend over to tie my shoes because I would get so, even if I had the mobility to do that, it was like I would get winded just tying my shoes. And I thought, that's probably not great. I should do something about that. So I started with, and this is going to sound funny now, but my start was every day after work, I would take what was probably about a 4-minute walk around the block. And that was it. And then after doing that for a couple of weeks, I was like, maybe I'll eat French fries only once a day. And that was my diet.
Small changes over a long time is the
But
goal.
I tell you what, I lost about 15 pounds because, spoiler alert, your body doesn't want to weigh over 400 pounds.
Let me ask you.
That's got to be some work to get it, to keep it.
And I honestly, I'm asking this out of 100% ignorance.
Yeah.
Do you feel different when you go from 420 to 405?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because it just, to me, it seems either weight is so uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, it doesn't feel different at all. What feels different is, in my experience, every time I dropped about a pant size, it would feel different to me. Not just because my clothes fit differently, but because it was like, oh, I could breathe a little bit better, or I noticed I could move a little bit more, right?
I only laugh because I've never thought, and again, this is from total ignorance, I can breathe better. That doesn't make sense to me. I can breathe just fine all the time, and so it's foreign.
I mean, literally, it's like I know that there are some weight vests there. It would be the equivalent of if you sat in a chair with what, 150 pound, 200-pound weight vest on you. Just sit there for 10 minutes. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, that sounds
and that's just
terrible.
how a person, yeah. But, you know, obviously, so you get used to it, so you don't know how bad it is until you realize how bad it is. So I did that. And then eventually it was like, boy, this is going okay with making small changes. What if I make some bigger changes? And that's when I started to explore diets. And when I say diets, I mean the worst version of diets you're imagining. I mean the Dr. Oz books. I mean the stuff that you see on like the cover of magazines. You know, eat nothing but watermelon for 3 months and see what happens. Like I remember I went on a diet one time that all of the causes and issues that you think would come from this diet did. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but it was the fiber diet.
Oh yeah.
And it was like,
could you go into detail? I really want to hear about this. 150
grams of fiber a day.
I don't.
And it was brutal. Now it worked because I couldn't eat anything because I was so full of fiber.
So no, you weren't full of fiber. It was going through you.
Yeah, it was. So, and that, you know, but I tried all those kinds of ridiculous things, and they all worked because diets work. That's what they do, right? They reduce calories. They're not sustainable, but they reduce calories and they help you lose weight. And I would jump from one to the next in that effort of going from 400 to 375 to 350. And every time I made some of those big jumps, I would get all kinds of praise, right, from people around me, from family, from people in my life at the time. And it just felt good. It literally felt good physically to me, even though I was suffering a little bit or struggling with food or whatever. It was nice to just be able to breathe better and look a little bit better in clothes. And hey, I don't need to shop at special stores anymore. I could just go to the regulars. I could buy something off a catalog if I want to. Isn't that crazy? And that process took me something in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 years to get from somewhere over 400 down to 210. 210 was the lowest I ever got. And I, in that process, as you can imagine, through 3-ish, maybe even 4 straight years of dieting with no breaking, gave myself at the time, though I didn't realize it, a pretty significant eating disorder. And when I say eating disorder, I really mean a disordered way of eating. There are some differences. Eating disorder is like a clinical diagnosis like anorexia or bulimia. Disordered eating is related, but it's not clinically diagnosed. So maladaptive relationship to food is basically how it's defined. So basically, having emotional issues related to your diet is disordered eating, is the best way to put that. So got down to 210, still wasn't happy. You know, still don't like myself, still don't like the way I look in the mirror, still don't really like much about me. And I figured, well, you know what, let me try adding in more and different kinds of exercise. And I literally just started Planet Fitness. I went to Planet Fitness and I was like, this is a inclusive environment for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
We don't speak of other gyms ever here.
Well, so I'll get to
I'm kidding.
So this is actually, it's interesting though, because there are a lot of places that where that's not a joke. And I actually think that Union, and I think I've written this on some posts and things like that with you guys, but is one of those places where I truly believe somebody who was in my situation like that before could come and get healthy and get strong and do some fun and different things and meet people without some of the stuff that comes with the other big box gym issues. And I really do believe that, which is one of the reasons that I, I'm so involved with a lot of the things at Union, is because it's the kind of place I believe in.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you guys are really putting together a great environment there. And so I, started to lift some weights, do some extra cardio, do some yoga, just whatever, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I just want to try everything and to see what feels good. And then as it turns out, having a little bit of muscle is kind of fun, as you guys know. So, a little bit of muscle turned into a little bit more, turned into like, I'm a lifter now, and that's what I do. And I strength train, and I want to get strong, and I want to get big. And I did that for a couple years, gained weight, to me, which was healthy. So I went from 210 to up in the 240s, fixed some metabolic issues that I had given myself. My thyroid was tanked after years of dieting. So I got that under control again, fixed that. Some other health related concerns at that point. I had really bad insomnia and some other things just related to basically crash dieting for years. got all those things under control. And then at that point also decided like I need to kind of learn everything I possibly can about nutrition, because that's going to help me get to the next level of finding whatever this happiness I was going to get from my body was, right? Someday I'll figure it out and it's going to make me happy and it's going to be great. All I need to do is learn, get a stack of books and learn everything I can about nutrition. So it's like, whatever the person was, the book they had, the podcast, the articles, the pay sites. I mean, I'm on probably 6 different pay sites for nutrition information. And it was great and it helped me a lot and it was all very useful. But, in the wrong hands, it can continue to feed this kind of disordered eating. And that's exactly what it did. And in the last like probably 6 months, what I realized was, and this isn't something, especially for men, that people talk about very much, which is one of the reasons I was interested in bringing it up on this podcast, is because I know that, we have a lot of guys in our gym who care about how they look and who, who want to get big and strong. And I see people eating diets in different ways, and and it's just an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about. More do now, but it's not as common. But ultimately, I think what I really figured out along the way was, and I'll tell you a little bit of a story that was kind of the rock bottom for me. A few months ago, it was around the holidays, and I can remember I was in the middle of kind of a final diet in my mind. It was like, this is going to be the diet to end all diets. I'm going to get shredded. It's going to be great, right? And it was around Christmas, and it's like I'm in my mind literally baking myself a batch of cookies. Mm-hmm. And I've got a day planned. I'm going to sit with this batch of cookies, and I bought myself a thing of eggnog, and I'm going to eat and drink all of this, because I'm budgeting it for myself, right? If it fits your macros, this is my day, this is my cheat day, this is my cheat meal. And I made myself so sick off of that stuff. And it's like, after I was done with that, I was like, why am I doing this? And then obviously that time of year, somebody, it's the Super Bowl time. Somebody invited me to their place. Hey, you want to come watch the Super Bowl? I got emotional. I literally, off to the side by myself, got very emotional about like, how am I going to fit this in? They're going to have nachos. They're not going to have healthy food for me to eat. And I'm literally like processing, do I just not go? And that was the point where I was like, I might have a problem.
Something's gone awry.
Yeah. If I'm legitimately like almost welling up with tears over the prospect of going to somebody's Super Bowl party, that's probably not good. So, I started to kind of follow some things online. That there was a couple of really great accounts on Instagram. If anybody's interested, Realistic Body Therapist is one of them. And I discovered this guy's name is Jake Lenardin, who's he's a research psychiatrist essentially in Australia, and he actually focuses on eating disorders and disordered eating. Found his account, and some of the stuff he posted is interesting, because I'm going to actually kind of take a look here and read a couple of things, because I found it so fascinating, because this was all stuff that he says is essentially, this is the definition of disordered eating. And to me is like, that's every day. That's normal. Isn't that normal? And I'm starting to ask people, don't you do this every day? And they're like, what are you talking about, man? No. And it's things like going in the other room to eat because you don't want people to see you. It's stuff like eating late at night or not around people because you're literally ashamed of the food you're eating. It's stuff like being willing to pick food out of the garbage because you need more macros, or because you're still hungry, you didn't finish it. Eating when you're not hungry because you need the protein, you need your macros, right? It's stuff like planning for gorge, binge, cheat days because that's the only time you're allowed to eat certain foods, getting emotional over certain foods, putting in your macros and counting them every day down to the individual macro because, fill in the blank, because you have to, right? Those are all things not eating certain foods, swapping out things from certain foods, not allowing yourself things. And that's all stuff that to some people on this call or on this podcast, you're like, yeah, that's every day. That's normal. Doesn't everybody do that? And it's like, apparently not. Apparently that's normal in a sort of a fitness industry, fitness space. And I thought it was funny because there was a study that came out about 3 months ago. It was related to that sort of Biggest Loser weight loss study from a few years ago. And the question that they asked was basically, what are some of the habits that make you more likely to keep the weight off? You know, after you've lost it, a significant amount of weight, I think it was like 25 pounds or more. And they look at it, you know, a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. And they said, what were the habits that kept people to keep the weight off? And ultimately, across the board, it was almost habit for habit, the same list of stuff that would basically qualify you to have disordered eating. So essentially, the takeaway from that is the best way to get thin and stay lean is to essentially develop an eating disorder. And I thought to myself, that can't be right. Right? Like, this isn't sustainable. I don't want to be 55 years old, 60 years old, putting in my whey shake into my app to make sure I got exactly 40, because I need my muscle protein synthesis, man. Right? So I started to play around and look for some different avenues, basically. It's like, how do I do this differently? Because this isn't sustainable.
You know, you said something there. I have to really emphasize, and it's, you know, doesn't everyone do this? And I think in our world, a lot of people do, and probably way too many. You know, I've said this to you before. You said something that was very impactful to me once. You said you have a very healthy relationship with food. You know, I pretty much mostly what I want when I want. I don't really, you know, I'm trying to get enough protein if I can, but I'm not that worried about it. And then you said, you know, do you ever sneak food or eat food in another room? And to be totally honest, my thought was only when I don't want my son to know I'm eating his ice cream.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not hiding it from anyone. I'm just stealing 10-6 ice cream.
It's a dad thing, huh?
Yeah. And so, you know, it's funny because it also took me back to a Simpsons episode where they said, is Homer an alcoholic? Do you ever hide beer? And he's like, do I? And he opens the toilet and there's a 6-pack in there. They're like, do you ever drink alone? He's like, do I? And he's drinking alone. And he says, do you ever drink to escape reality? And he drinks and he looks in the mirror and he's shredded. And I think, like you said, that's all a type of disordered eating, which a lot of people in the strength and fitness world have. And I struggle personally with the idea of that because I don't have that. And like you said, the only time I sneak food is when don't want my son to know about it. I'm going to eat 90% what I want and not think that hard about it. So I think, you know, I'm not going to make it as simple as there's two types of people in the world. Yeah. Because there's obviously a spectrum, but, you know, there are definitely probably more people closer to where you are than closer to where I am. And I think it's important to consider.
For sure. Especially in this kind of like fitness space. I think a lot of people now have been sort of programmed to believe that that's what you have to do. Like, if you want to look good, if you want to, whatever, get big, get strong, get shredded, get toned, whatever word you want to use, right? Then that's part of the process. And I think what we did was we took guidelines and science and all that kind of stuff, and we kind of bastardized it in a certain way. And we took it and we said, great, we can use this, but then we overdid it. And we said, we have to use it, and we have to use it in just this way because that's ideal, that's optimal. And the worst part, if you don't do it this way, you're bad, right? You know, you are all those bad things that we're trying to get away from. And I don't want to paint a picture that says that anybody who cares about how much protein you get in a day has an eating disorder. That's not what I'm saying. It's more about, how do you feel if you don't? How do you feel if you miss a meal that you were supposed to eat? Are you depressed? Are you upset? Are you anxious? That might be an issue.
Let me ask you, what word came to your mind, CJ? How do you feel if you miss a meal?
I mean, I probably lean towards more Ward side than Hammer side right now, especially because, I mean, like you say, I'm prepping for a meet. I'm close to my weight right now for the class.
What emotion is it then? If you miss a meal, what's your emotion?
It depends on the day. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. Some days I'm okay with it. Like, oh, I'll get her tomorrow, guys. Some days I'll stay, like last night I stayed up an hour later just so I could like make my eggs and finish my meal, and then I went to bed like an hour later than I normally did. But
See,
I knew I had to get my
I'm such a simpleton that my thought was, how do you feel if you miss a meal? And I thought, hungry.
right.
That's all I think is like,
Yeah.
how do you feel?
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's super interesting.
I missed a meal. I'm hungry. Of course.
I was in a place where, and so I'll talk about this person I started working with in a second, but I was in a place where I did not understand hunger cues anymore. I couldn't wrap my mind around them.
It was just
because
time to eat.
Yeah, it's beef o'clock basically, right? It's like, okay, well, it's time for my next meal. Or ironically, is this like, if I'm dieting or cutting, or whatever word you want to use, my brain is hungry all the time, 24 hours a day, regardless of whether or not I just ate or didn't eat or what I want. It's like just the act of restricting made me psychologically hungry all the time. But that's an interesting point, because that's usually one of the first things that occurs is when you start to kind of have a goal, right? When you start to work toward a show, bodybuilding show, powerlifting meet, competition, weight, powerlifting, a lot of powerlifting is weight class based, right? And so once you start to have those goals, you start to, okay, what's the best way to achieve these goals? Cool, that's optimal. I get that. This is how much carbs, fats, protein I need. Stay away from the alcohol, get plenty of sleep. All that's right. All that's exactly, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem becomes the emotionality and how it impacts us and how it triggers us later on. And I don't think it happens right away to everybody. I know it doesn't. It didn't happen to me right away. But the thing to worry about is, if you're listening to this, if you know somebody, or if you're around people in the gym who you see the dysregulation of their emotions. I'm sad, angry, depressed. I'm a bad person if I miss my meal, right? There's a difference between what you just said to you, which is ideal. Yeah, miss my meal. Get it tomorrow. Not a big deal. Now, and you said you have some bad days. Everybody does. That's okay. But if you find that you or somebody is consistently in that place where that's never okay, where you're staying up late to make sure you eat your food every day or most days, where you are binge eating every weekend because every Saturday is cheat day, and it goes from cheat meal to cheat day to cheat weekend because you need that thing. That's when you start to get into like, okay, probably need to address that. And addressing that looks different for everybody, but essentially usually it looks like getting some kind of help.
So say you figure it out and you've addressed that you have like something's not right.
Yeah.
I guess this is the therapist side, but like, what cues or like reminders helped you when you're feeling off and need to like readjust or reset? Are there like verbal cues, physical? Do you need like a support system? Like, what's the best way for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a few different things that are very helpful. Having a support system is really good. And it's useful if you can cultivate that, but it's a little bit hard because a lot of people either don't understand, but like most people's like mom, like you can't explain to your mom like, why are you so sad? Because I missed my whey shake.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what are you talking about? So it becomes hard to cultivate that. But if you can do that, that's always really helpful. The biggest thing that always helped me in this process, I did get a coach. I started working with her name's Gabrielle Fundero. She does intuitive mindful eating. So I started doing that. I started working really hard on that. I don't think it's necessary to get a coach. It is also a little bit expensive, but for me it was worth it because I had spent so much money on dieting and all that kind of stuff that it was worth it.
You've made your investment.
Exactly. Invest in myself, my future. But I think that kind of what you learn in that is understanding yourself by asking yourself questions. And that's, to me, the biggest thing that a person can do. Be mindful of how you feel. So I missed a meal and I feel bad. Before you start to judge yourself, try to take a step back, take a deep breath, and walk away from that for a second. Notice the feeling that you feel, then start asking yourself questions about it. What is the worst thing that can happen? Why am I so upset that I missed? And I'll give you an actual example for me. They're going to help illustrate what this looks like. so there was a given day when I missed my pre-bed snack at the time was exactly weighed out, 8 ounces of Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, non-fat, of course, right? Because you can't have fat ever. With a scoop of whey. So all in all, that ended up being about, depending on the thing at the time, I'm struggling to even remember now, but it was about 38 grams of protein. Okay. I needed to have that 38 grams of protein because if I missed that 38 grams of protein, when I woke up in the morning, I would be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
My muscles would shrink.
Weaker.
Absolutely. My squat goes down immediately. I lose 25 pounds off my squat if I don't have this bowl of yogurt with the whey. And that sounds like kind of crazy, but there's a part of a lot of people who are going to listen to this where you're like, nah, I get that.
Well, I think the industry pushes that so much with the anabolic window. There's no anabolic window.
Right.
45 minutes. You got to eat. Is it better to eat after you train? Absolutely. Does anything magically happen at minute 46? No, that's BS. We all know it's BS. Eat as soon as you can. Try to be prepared to eat. But if you can't eat, well, that's okay. The world won't end. The trainings, I can't stand when I read, and this is the downside of social media. Your workout was wasted if you didn't eat within 2 hours. No, it wasn't. The training session didn't go and disappear. The body is not optimally fueled for recovery. But at the same time, you trained hard. You broke down muscle tissue. It's going to rebuild itself one way or another.
Yeah.
So I think part of the problem becomes how it's communicated. It's the social media pumps this up. The absolutists get more engagements on social media.
Yeah.
This is right and that is wrong. And you're saying it right there. Right and wrong. It always gets pumped up. And if people say, well, hold on. It depends. There's no right and wrong. There's gray areas. This is probably going to work best, but try it this way. When someone asks me about something in training, I go, try it. Give it 6 weeks and tell me what you think. Because I don't know. And you're not going to know until you try it. So I just think that that's such an issue, and I think social media perpetuates it. Social media, influencers are let's be honest here.
Mama said they're the devil.
They're garbage.
Yeah, they are.
Well, they're
the devil and the garbage.
I'm gonna pump this up a little. My blog yesterday, I talked about most influencers are 20 somethings who have had six packs their whole life. Like, shut up, do it for 20 years. Go through a time when you don't have a six pack. It will be okay. Like Tenzig was getting out of bed today and he looked down. I said, Dad, look, I have the squares on my stomach. Your squares aren't that good. And he said, why not? I said, I like chocolate, son.
Yeah.
And then he goes, I like chocolate. I go, yeah, but you're young and you like chocolate. I'm old and I like chocolate. But, understand that that person you see on Instagram is not real. That's not real life. That's filters. That's good angles. We have a magic mirror here at work that everyone looks big in. You know about the magic mirror?
Mm-mm.
There's a magic mirror here. We'll have to show it to you because you said earlier that you didn't like to look at yourself in the mirror. We have a mirror with special lighting that everyone looks big and good in.
I think everyone makes the mirror look great, Ward.
Yeah. we just have some great looking people in the gym. That's all.
Yeah.
Someone loves that mirror. I'm not going to say who. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I've told the same person to say, take a picture in there and see how you look.
Yeah. There
we
you
can
go.
compare.
I digress.
No. I think you're exactly right. It's a really important thing, which is that it actually ties really nicely to kind of the back end of that questioning yourself kind of a thing. Because it's like, that's a good place to stop for some people, but it's like, no, you need to keep going. What would it mean? What would it mean? What would it look like if I lost 25 pounds off my squat? What would it mean? What would it look like if I got smaller? What is the yogurt doing for me? And then you start to get into the more psychological stuff of like, I'm afraid to get smaller because why? Oh, well, because maybe if I'm smaller, people won't like me as much.
And you're getting,
special about me.
Questions should lead to more questions. The
absolutely.
wise person doesn't stop the questioning.
I think it's always dangerous. Like when, say for example, bodybuilders, they're at their show and everyone sees how great and lean they look, and they say, "Hey, you look amazing," but it's not like a healthy body weight to keep. And then in their mind, like, wow, everyone says I look really good now. I have to stay like this forever. and then bad things happen.
But I think Jesse, you know, Jesse's transformations, I think, are a great example of that. You know, is she going to return to where she was a year and a half ago? She's not, you know, she gonna stay at the super lean body weight? Probably not. You can't physically sustain that body walking around.
Enjoyably, at least.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like you can,
health.
but it's suffering.
It's suffering, and it's going to impact your health, your relationships,
Yeah.
your social life. There's going to be so many negative impacts, and you have to live your life and understand that that is a great accomplishment you did. Now it's okay to have a piece of cheesecake.
Right. But that's a really good point, because, and I'm not saying this about Jesse, but let's just use the avatar of a bodybuilder, because that's a perfect example of this, because I was in that same place. Is what is it giving you that's not about your body? It's giving you acceptance. It's giving you esteem, something special about you, something people like about you. And if you're somebody who is a little shy or a little introverted or has a hard time with that kind of stuff, that becomes your identity. So now I miss a bowl of yogurt doesn't mean I missed a bowl of yogurt. It means I'm losing affection from people. I'm losing connection.
I'm not Big Ward anymore.
Exactly. I lose my identity. And that's way more. I mean, that's the truth. And that's where it gets into like, oh, that's why I feel sad when I miss a steak. It's not about the steak, right? It's about all the other stuff that feels important to me, that's related to my image, to the body stuff, to everything else. And that's not easy. It's not easy to ask yourself those questions, because it gets ugly fast.
Well, you'll always be my Ward.
I know, right?
No matter what.
Well,
but that's it's a tough thing to get to the place where, you know, you can feel comfortable enough with yourself and comfortable enough in your own skin to just be like, I'm me, and it's going to look a bunch of different ways, but that's okay.
I'll be honest with you. The closest I've ever come to this, and again, this might be just how simple I am as a human, is growing my hair long. Like, I don't think I look good with long hair. I think I look old and kind of like not good.
Wizardly.
But wizardly. But this is the second time I've grown my hair out, and it, again, I had an athlete who, when I cut my hair off the first time, said, "You used to look like a strength coach. Now you look like a dad." And I was like, that doesn't sound like a good thing at all. And that was probably the closest I ever came to letting my identity be defined by that, by the look. Obviously, I think that's a minor thing, but still, it probably has started to give me a little empathy to people that do define themselves by that look. You know, how do I look big? And that's actually, you know, I'm a huge Henry Rollins fan, because when he talks about training, you know, it is about what's inside of you. You know, when Henry talks about training, I remember I saw him speak actually at Stage AE a few years back, or actually no, it was out in Oakland he spoke. And he said, you know, whenever I get to a city, I find a record store, and I find, you know, a little hipster spot, it's a coffee shop, and he goes, I find a gym. And he said, it was a conditioning day, so I have a great conditioning mix of Miles Davis and Slayer. I was like, what a great mix. You know, Henry's my kind of dude. And he said it was conditioning day, so I decided I would get on the elliptical, and every time Slayer came on, I would crank it. And every time Miles Davis came on, I'd chill. And he said, and I was going to do it for an hour. And he said, I was in this tiered gym, you know, and the ellipticals were top tier. And he said, I'm going, it's 45 minutes in, I'm sweating. And he says, I had this feeling people were looking at me, and I didn't know what was going on. Then I realized every time Slayer came on, I started going as hard as I can, and I was spraying sweat down upon the next two tiers. You know, the treadmills are just getting rained upon, and the bikes are getting rained upon every time Henry Rollins gets rolling. And again, to him, he was so internalized in that training session that he didn't even notice he was doing it. And there's something beautiful about that simplicity. Yeah. You know, pre-COVID, there was something beautiful about whenever you were getting ready to lift someone off and bench, and the sweat dripped off their forehead in your eye, and you still benched. Yeah. You know, and COVID happened. They're like, oh my God, get the spray.
No, you can't do that anymore now.
Yeah.
Oh, bad.
But that's happened to me. I mean, I can count. That's happened to me, you know, dozens of times.
Not a fan, but it happened.
But I think the fact that that's not going to prevent you from getting that rep.
Yeah.
You know, you're so into that moment that, yes, sweat just dripped off your forehead into my eye socket. That's disgusting. But in the moment, I don't care because I'm benching.
Yeah.
I must achieve this set or whatever it may be. So I think that's kind of up that alley. Mm-hmm. So to finish us off, where are you at now mentally, spiritually, and emotionally?
Yeah, well, that's a big question.
And physically, you're in Green Tree, I think.
physically, I moved. So I'm in
secret layer. Don't give a
yeah.
secret.
Like Batman.
If you find it, you get to participate though in all this goodness here.
That scares me.
Yeah. So I have not tracked any food in about 3 months.
Nice.
I have not literally tracked a macro. I have like just because it doesn't go away once you get it, I have like a little protein tracker in my head, but I'm not purposefully, saying I have to hit this. I just know, that this is how, this is how much protein is probably in this meal. So I've not tracked anything. I weigh myself, like in the last 3 months, I've weighed myself twice, and one of them was only because Hammer, you didn't believe when I said how much I thought I weighed.
Oh, nice job, Hammer.
Well,
I thought you were 20 pounds heavier. Your arms are so damn big.
So that's the ironic thing, is that once I stopped caring, not that I don't care about my health, right? But once I started to focus on my performance and how do I feel in the gym? What do I want to feel like? What do I want to do? How do I want to eat? What are the foods that I really actually enjoy? How do I want to eat them? Once I started doing that, I got in like the best shape of my life on accident. Like it just sort of like happened. And, you guys, we talk about it periodically, but it's like, I was keeping myself heavier than I needed to be out of fear of this thing. And once I got rid of that fear and allowed myself to just exist doing these activities that I like to do, my body changed without me needing to try to do it. And it was interesting, and it still is, and it's going to change again, right? As I age, as I do different things, like I'm really truly just focused on how does it feel when I do a certain thing. So you mentioned Henry Rollins on the elliptical. That's honestly one of the biggest reasons I do the elliptical for like an hour twice a week, is because it's transcendent for me. I turn on, I have a playlist, of course, right? And I'm out of my head. I get rid of my ego. I'm in this like almost meditative place. And I've been on the elliptical a couple times and literally started crying, not because of the pain or but just because I'm going through like the music and I'm feeling something, and and I'm just not even in the gym at that point. Like I'm often in my own world doing that. And that's why I do it. It's not because it's burning I don't know how many calories I burn necessarily like doing that. I just know I want to do it for about this long because that's about how long it feels good for.
Ward, last question. 60-second answer.
Aggressive.
If you were a supervillain, what would your name be, and why and how would you dominate the world?
Oh gosh, 60-second answer.
2 calories.
Don't.
So I always say that I'm like Smart Hulk. Like when he's especially in the newer Avengers movie, when he has glasses and he's like, hey, and he like pretends to rip his shirt off. He's like, whoa, That's kind of my whole vibe. So I'd be that guy who decided to be evil for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would probably have something to do with like society and culture and feeling like we're going in the wrong direction.
Didn't Edward Norton play Hulk at one point?
Yeah.
He did.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's a good one, because Edward Norton's basically
he's pretty the man.
Coolest actor of our time.
Yeah.
Up there.
I've heard a few
thoughts
good
from the bench. You
podcasts
guys
with
can
it.
rate it and then give
Edward Norton films.
Little Nicky the
Top
shaft.
10 Edward Norton films.
I didn't do it.
That was terrible.
It wasn't me.
They did a top 10 Adam Sandler film thing, and Little Nicky was 10, and we had to.
It might have the best soundtrack to any movie ever made.
Pulp Fiction.
Better.
Because Everlong plays twice in it. Is that
Oh,
why it's
okay.
the best?
Well,
It literally plays 2 different times in the
40,
movie. Is that why it's your favorite?
You're not wrong.
I'll be honest with you. For me personally, this was the most insightful podcast I've heard in a long time, been a part of, because I think, touching on mental health, disordered eating with men, something we don't talk about enough, and something that is absolutely there. People need to hear it. And hopefully a lot of people listen to this one, because I think, especially in our world, people need to hear what you said. And take
I hope so.
Be more mindful with themselves, with their moments. With you talked about getting in a meditative state. I try to meditate every day. I do most days, at least 10 to 20 minutes. But I think that's something that more men need to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I know we're running short on time here, but I do. If anybody wants to learn more about this, learn specifics, some more of the specific things that I do to help manage some of these things, I'm more than happy to talk about it, help, give you resources. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to do that. I think this is really important stuff for people's well-being.
You're the man, Ward. We appreciate you, brother.
Yep. Thanks very much.
We'll have you back for round 2 for music and more fun stuff too.
All
music and whiskey.
Chris Cornell and David Bowie all day. Well, thank you, Ward, for coming on. Thank you, Josh, for being such a great producer and only freaking out half the time.
The mustache,
the
the charm.
Are here. We all appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening to Union Fitness Podcast. Don't catch us next week, because that's when the other 2 hosts are on, and you don't want to hear them talk. You want to hear the dynamic duo.
Nobody better than us, baby.
We love y'all. Keep
part
it
of
real
the ship,
out there,
part of the
friends.
crew.